Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're journeying back to the Middle Ages, not to explore castles or battles, but to dive deep into an activity that was central to medieval life, the hunt. It was so much more than just a way to get food. It was a sport, a social event, a training ground for war, and a powerful symbol of status. So grab your horn and let's ride into the wild forests of medieval Europe. First, let's get one thing straight. Not just anyone could go hunting. The best hunting grounds, the forests, were often owned by the king or the nobility. These were called forests, not just because they had trees, but because they were areas under special forest law. This law was incredibly strict. If a commoner was caught poaching, especially prized animals like deer or boar, the punishments could be severe, ranging from hefty fines to blinding or even hanging. For the nobility, however, the hunt was a rite and a passion. What were they hunting? The most prestigious prey was called the beasts of the chase. This group included the red deer, specifically the stag, the wild boar, the roe deer, and the wolf. Hunting these animals required courage, skill, and a whole lot of resources. The stag, with its magnificent antlers, was considered the king of the forest and the ultimate prize. A successful stag hunt was a massive boost to a lord's reputation. The wild boar was equally respected, but for different reasons. It was famously ferocious and dangerous, known to turn on its hunters and fight to the death. A boar hunt was a true test of bravery. Now, a medieval hunt wasn't a solo affair. It was a grand spectacle, a massive operation involving dozens, sometimes hundreds of people. At the heart of it were the specialized huntsmen. There was the master of the hunt, who organized everything. Then you had limer huntsmen, who used leashed hounds called limers to find the trail of the animal early in the morning. There were kennelmen who managed the packs of hounds, and yeoman prickers who rode with the hounds to keep them on track. And of course you had the beaters, often local peasants, whose job was to make a racket and drive the prey towards the waiting hunters. And let's talk about the real stars of the show for a moment, the dogs. Medieval nobles were obsessed with their hunting dogs. They were bred for specific tasks and were incredibly valuable. There were different types for different stages of the hunt. Scent hounds, like the Talbot hound, were used to follow the animal's scent trail. Greyhounds and other sight hounds were gaze hounds that hunted by sight, prized for their incredible speed to run down prey in the open. Then you had mastiffs and alaunts, powerful, fierce dogs used for cornering and bringing down dangerous game like boar and bear. These dogs were cared for, better than many people, with their own attendants and special diets. The hunt itself followed a set of elaborate rituals. It would begin at dawn with the discovery of the prey's tracks. Once the master of the hunt decided which animal to pursue, the hounds would be let loose. The air would fill with the sound of hunting horns. Each horn blast was a specific signal, a language in itself, communicating things like, "The stag has been sighted," "The hounds are on the trail," or "The animal is cornered." The nobility would follow on horseback, a thundering procession through the forest. The chase could last for hours, covering miles of rough terrain. It was an exhilarating, adrenaline-fueled pursuit. The final moments of the hunt were intense. When the animal was exhausted and brought to bay, it was time for the quarry. This is when one of the high-ranking nobles would dismount and deliver the final killing blow with a spear or a special hunting sword. This was a moment of great honor. After the kill, another set of rituals began right there in the forest. The curé was the rewarding of the hounds, where they were given parts of the slain animal as a prize for their work. Then came the unmaking, or butchering of the animal, which was also a highly skilled and ritualized process. Every part of the animal was used. The best cuts of meat were for the lord's table, while other parts were given to the huntsmen and even the dogs. The antlers, skin, and head were taken back as trophies. The day would conclude with a massive feast back at the castle or manor house. The successful hunt was a reason for celebration. The tables would be laden with food, wine would flow freely, and minstrels would sing tales of the day's heroic chase. The main course, of course, was the game they had just hunted. It was a way for the Lord to display his wealth, power, and generosity, feeding his entire household with the bounty of his private forest. This feast reinforced the social order and the bonds between the Lord and his retainers. But not all hunting was this grand chase on horseback. There was also hawking, or falconry. This was the sport of using trained birds of prey to hunt smaller game like ducks, herons, and rabbits. Falconry was considered a very noble and refined art, and it wasn't just for men. Noble women were often avid falconers. A high-quality hawk or falcon was a hugely expensive and prestigious gift. The birds were meticulously trained and cared for, often hooded and carried on the falconer's gloved fist. Unlike the noisy, chaotic energy of the deer hunt, falconry was a quieter, more graceful and strategic sport, requiring immense patience and a deep understanding of the birds. Hunting also served a very practical purpose beyond sport and status: military training. The skills needed for the hunt were directly transferable to the battlefield. Tracking an enemy, navigating difficult terrain, wielding weapons like spears and bows from horseback, and commanding groups of men and animals. All of this was practiced during the hunt. The forest was a training ground that kept a knight and his retinue in peak physical condition and sharpened their martial skills during times of peace. The courage needed to face a charging boar was the same courage needed to face an enemy in battle. So, when we picture the Middle Ages, we should add the image of the hunt to our mental tapestry. It was a complex and vital part of noble culture. It was a display of power, a social ritual, a thrilling sport, an essential training for war. It shaped the landscape, the law, and the daily lives of both the rich and the poor. It was a world where the baying of hounds and the call of the hunting horn echoed through the forests, a sound that meant sport for some and danger for others. The medieval hunt was, in essence, a reflection of the medieval world itself, hierarchical, dangerous, ritualistic, and full of life. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey into the medieval forest. I hope you found it as fascinating as I do. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what other aspects of medieval life you'd like to explore next. Until then, stay curious.